Vicky, we live in this hookup culture where much of our society, they think that they can just go on one-night stands and just have consequence-free relationships, sexual relationships.
Well, it's interesting because that's a lie that abounds, that we've come through the media and other things to believe there's no consequence to sex. And as long as you're contracepting or whatever, it's all fine. But we don't really understand how it is our bodies work. We need to recognize, for instance, that we as women undergo profound changes when we have sex with a male, that there are many things that change. It takes our body 6 months to make the adaptation to the sperm of our male partner, because before that we are in an autoimmune reaction. Our immune cells are testing. What is this? Is this an infection? What is it? Our body comes to conclude that this is our sexual partner and now has made an adaptation. The reality is that this allows us women to be without consequence in terms of when we conceive children with this male, our body recognizes that this is with our partner. We carry cells from every child we ever conceive, so we carry the DNA of our partners the rest of our lives. It's an interesting question. If I've had multiple partners and perhaps conceptions with multiple partners, that what might that mean to my body in terms of the immune system? Because I will now literally be carrying the genetic material of my partners contained in my children. We don't know what the long-term consequences of that are. The sperm has many antigens on it. And again, we think this is kind of neutral. We women have bodies that are acidic in chemistry and males are alkaline. But what's interesting is that the last thing that happens with sperm production is there's a coating of vitamin C that's put on the sperm that allows it to survive in our woman bodies. So we make this adaptation to our partner. Sperm has these antigens, and interestingly in men, if there should be a vasectomy or damage, what we've discovered is that in the male body, sperm and blood don't ever meet each other if it's healthy. When there's damage, for the first time, the sperm and the blood meet, and it sets off an autoimmune reaction in the male. It's designed to do that, but this can lead to health issues for the male. Vasectomies are promoted as, safe, not a problem. But in reality, there are a few very brave doctors who have written about the fact that the male who has had a vasectomy may now develop autoimmune disorders, arthritis, some other sorts of diseases. There's also the question, of course, of where does the sperm go, which can create some very uncomfortable things for the male. But there's more, again, also for the male. The reality is that seminal fluid, which we think of as kind of a carrier, it just kind of gets the sperm where it needs to go, is in fact biochemically very active. There are more than 30 different compounds that are contained in the seminal fluid. Different kinds of sugars, things like zinc, which would enhance our, as women, autoimmune system so that we might not contract diseases from pathogens that would be present in intercourse. All these different kinds of substances. There are also many, many hormones that are there. Luteinizing hormone, we think that's a woman hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone, that's a woman hormone. 13 kinds of prostaglandins. Some other things like dopamine are there. Why? Because we women absorb that material and we're changed forever. Every time we have intercourse with someone, if we absorb any of that seminal fluid, it's in our system for at least 15 hours. We're changed in a very real and concrete way by this sexual intimacy that's there. Furthermore, the brain chemistry in both men and women is triggered with sexual intimacy. And we believe that because I say this is just a sexual encounter for pleasure, I'm not going to be changed, that it works. Our brain never gets the message that this has no consequence. The assumption on the part of our body is that sexual intimacy always has consequences, always has meaning. And as soon as we have this intimacy with this person, we trigger brain chemistry. We trigger, for instance, oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone both in men and women. There are other feedback systems there that make the brain feel good. Men, in particular, get vasopressin. This is a male hormone. We women have a little, but it's predominantly male. And when we have sexual intimacy with someone, what happens to the male is this hormone now makes him have a preference for this female that he just had sex with. Hooking up, the sense that it doesn't matter, is physiologically an impossibility. We know that in men, it takes 72 days to produce sperm, and that at each point there's a change in the sperm. It's changed in some way. But what we don't realize is that the sperm has to be changed in the woman's body to have the capacity to enter the egg. There's a phenomenon when the sperm enters that's called capacitation and adaptation. For 5 hours or so, it sits in our woman bodies, and our woman chemistry changes the sperm. So now the sperm has the capacity to enter the egg, to go through this acrosome reaction. Before that, it can't do it. It swims differently after this. It swims with, if you will, more intent. Prior to that, the tail is kind of lazy and it moves it where it needs to go, but not with determination. After being changed by the female body, the tail is this whiplash kind of thing. It's very direct, it's very effective in moving the sperm forward to meet the ovum. This is incredible when you think about it. There is an author in Britain who has written about the fact that supposedly there are 3 types of male sperm. The first is called the egg getter, the second is called the blocker, and the third is called the killer. I think maybe he was a rugby fan or something, because they're not really highly technical terms, but if you look at pictures of sperm, you can see 2 of these for certain. You can see that the egg getters are what we expect. They're very sleek, a pointed head and a tail, but the blockers are misshapen. They're kind of boxy, or they don't look like this very sleek sperm. The intent of the blockers is that they will fill in the crypts in the cervix. There are little compartments there, so that the egg getters can move through without getting stuck. Of the millions of sperm that come into our bodies, there's maybe only 20 or 40 that really get to the point of the egg. So there's this protective factor there. We want to get the egg getters where they need to go. The role of the killers has to do only when women have had multiple partners in a short period of time. These are very poisonous little sperm, and their intent is to kill the sperm of the other male. So effectively, there is a sperm war that goes on in the woman's body when there have been multiple partners. Also think about this in terms of the adaptation of her autoimmune system. Who's my partner? Her immune system must be on a real state of arousal here, because there's sperm from several males, and her body is trying to make this time adaptation. And what happens, this is purely a question that I don't know the answer to, but what happens when I've had many partners and my body hasn't made this 6-month adaptation to the recognition that this is my partner? Now, you can get pregnant before this. You can get pregnant the first time you have sex. In fact, there's always a question sometimes from young people. They've been told you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex. But the reality is that we women are interested in sex. We're more arousable at the time of ovulation. Males around us perceive that we're ovulating by scent. They have an elevated testosterone level. They're more interested in sex. And sex happens, and pregnancy happens. And people are surprised by, how did that come to be? But the awareness that we're different. To know also that we women are very conditionable at the time of ovulation. This is some media effects research, and they had shown an erotic movie to women who were ovulating, and all of the women had an erotic response to this movie. They showed the same movie to women at other phases. We have different stages of our cycle. We have the follicular stage, when the little follicles on our ovaries are developing. We have the ovulation stage, when one of the follicles breaks loose and the ovum is released in our body. And then the last stage is the luteal phase, when the little place on the ovary where the ovum was released becomes a major chemical factory, keeping the ovum alive to see if there is a pregnancy. And if there is, then keeping the baby alive until the baby builds its placenta. But this awareness here that during ovulation, we're arousable. They showed the same movie to a group of women at these other phases, and there was a consistent response, but it was basically a very stupid, dirty movie. No erotic response. But the woman who saw this film once during ovulatory phase had an erotic response showing the movie. Now, again, at any point in her cycle. The anthropologists talk about the fact that this is perhaps why, if we have sex with Mr. Wrong when we're ovulating, we now are hooked to Mr. Wrong. We all know that Mr. Wrong leads to Mr. Wrong number 2. So this awareness of how this give and take, this dance, if you will, between men and women is so important. And it's so critical that we as women and men understand there's a lot more going on in our bodies than we've ever been told, so that we can, A, make really good choices about this. Do I want my body to be changed by this male? If I'm going to have sex with him, one, I am going to be changed by him. And we don't even know what some of the long-term consequences of this are, but we know that she's absorbing the material. And, you know, how do I want to live my life? How do I want to be changed by my partner? What consequences might there be if I make these choices where I have, you know, repetitive sexual partners? We don't know what some of these long-term consequences are. We do know, for instance, that the woman who has multiple partners in a short period of time may develop an infection that's called bacterial vaginosis, which is a very serious infection. And what happens is that the chemistry of her genital area has been changed, and now the bacteria that can grow there are what are called anaerobic bacteria. Those are always serious infections. Again, what we think is simple, what we think is without consequence, in fact has serious long-term consequences. And, you know, the more I learn about this, the more I'm in awe that nature, God has built us in this way to be complementary to each other, that we truly are changed by our partner and really become one in terms of this.
Thank you, Vicki.